For this week's discussion board, I chose to do this in my classroom here at the school that I teach at, and you can see some of the presidents behind me. I want to start off with one of the tenets from the biblical worldview philosophy from the history department at Liberty. And number 3 states that God has established order, intelligence, and truth in the universe and history. And going on the facet of established order. And I'll come back to that in just a second. This week I chose to talk about the 10th Amendment. While others they're all important. They're much more common. You hear about it in the news a lot, but the 10th Amendment is an important one. And I'm going to go ahead and read it, and then we'll get into the video. The title states, unlimited rights go to states or to the people. It states, the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. So throughout the mid-1800s and going into the 20th century, this amendment has often been referred to as the State Rights Amendment because it is the amendment that tries to preserve the boundaries of the federal government. This amendment clearly dictates one of the 6 constitutional principles, which is federalism. Federalism, according to Constitution.net, states that when we began as our nation in the 1780s, we began with dual federalism, where the states and the federal government were almost co-equals. They were sovereign, completely separate entities, but they were equal. And how we have drifted from that to being more so of a cooperative, with the federal government being the supreme power over the 10th Amendment, over states' rights, over everything. And it wasn't an overnight switch, but it was a general, slow, steady thing. And a lot of that can be contributed to when we have crises. I talk about with my students in the Civil War, how President Lincoln greatly expanded the power of the presidency of the federal government. You see that in the Great Depression with FDR and in World War II. And it seems natural to expand it in a time of crisis, but when that crisis is over, the government never relinquishes that power. And an article that was written by Gary Lawson and Robert Shapiro states that these last 2 amendments, the 9th and the 10th, address the concerns of the Constitution defenders, that these enumerations of rights were pointless and even dangerous. They go on to state the 9th and 10th Amendments are also evoke themes of popular sovereignty, highlighting the foundational role of the people in the constitutional republic. So Madison wanted these amendments, the 9th and the 10th, because he wanted to preserve this idea of limited government. We've got a written constitution, word for word, black and white. You can see it right there on the page. What it says is what you get. What's not there, leave it to the states. And that's what Madison wanted to do, because he didn't want the federal government to be so overbearing and oppressive that the states have no freedom to do what they think they should do. These 2 authors of this article go on to say that it remains a government of limited and enumerated powers, so that the first question involving an exercise of federal power is not whether it violates someone's rights, but whether it exceeds the national government's enumerated powers. And going back to that tenet that I read at the beginning of this video, that God has established order, intelligence in the universe and throughout history. God established order. God established, we saw in the Bible, especially in Romans 13, the principles that God sets up for government and obeying government, and the order that comes with government. However, there can be great disorder when the government becomes too vast and becomes too big, overbearing over respective state governments. And while this amendment is not talked about, it is still greatly important for the benefit of preserving the relationship between national and federal governments, national and state governments in today's world in the United States of America.